James Hohmann is a national political correspondent for the Washington Post and author of The Daily 202. Good enough to join us now from Washington. James, I do want to get to the travel ban in just a moment, but your paper broke a very significant piece of news this morning surrounding a conversation National Security Advisor Mike Flynn had with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. during the transition period. What can you tell us?
So we have known that there was a phone call between Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, and the Russian ambassador to the United States. They admitted that, but they have categorically and repeatedly denied, several Trump officials, that sanctions came up at all. In fact, the day before yesterday, Flynn told one of my colleagues twice in an interview, no, when asked if sanctions had been mentioned during one of his conversations with the Russians. The White House had said that it was a Christmas conversation, that it was to express condolences about a plane crash, and another call to express condolences about a murdered ambassador. So they've repeatedly denied that there was any talk of sanctions. Three of my colleagues have 9 sources, senior officials, former and current officials in the government, who have told them that indeed sanctions were discussed, that there is incontrovertible evidence of it, that Michael Flynn has not been telling the truth. And so this is a kind of, in some ways, not surprising. A lot of people thought that these denials were hollow, but at the same time, it really is a blow to the administration, and it widens a credibility gap that has already been expanding. And
not just for the National Security Advisor. In fact, I want to take a look and to listen to what Vice President Mike Pence had to say back in January on Face the Nation. I want to get you to weigh in on the other side.
What I can confirm, having spoken to him about it, is that those conversations that happened to occur around the time that the United States took action to expel diplomats had nothing whatsoever to do with those sanctions.
And so here we are again in this morning's Daily 202. You write that, and I quote, either the National Security Advisor misled the Vice President, or the Vice President knowingly misled the American people. And I just wonder, if nothing else, James, what do you think would be more damaging here?
Well, it's certainly humiliating for Mike Pence, and I can tell you, after our story posted last night, I heard from an administration official who basically said, it was the former of those two things, that Mike Pence was misled by National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, that Pence was simply repeating what he had been told and took in good faith from the National Security Advisor. And I also hear that the Vice President is frustrated that he was put in this humiliating position of basically telling something to the American people on CBS that wasn't true. And so there's a lot of frustration in the White House. This adds to the feeling that Michael Flynn has once again gotten the West Wing into trouble. So there's a great deal of frustration, but I do think it's more damaging to the administration if Mike Pence had knowingly told a falsehood to the American people. I mean, you may recall back in 2012, after the Benghazi attack that left our ambassador dead in Libya, Susan Rice, then the UN ambassador, went on CBS and said that it was a YouTube video that had prompted the incident. In fact, we learned later that wasn't true. Susan Rice said that she had gotten bad intelligence, was simply repeating what intelligence professionals had told her, but a lot of Republicans called for her head. People accused her of participating in a cover-up at the highest levels of the administration. So we'll see how this sort of plays out too, but there are a lot of echoes of the Benghazi situation with Susan Rice. You can't not tell the truth on the Sunday shows.
And made more acute, let's face it, as it regards any sort of extra governmental contact between the United States and Russia for this administration in particular. You actually write that some senior U.S. officials see this as inappropriate and potentially illegal. What is the fallout, if nothing else, from Mike Flynn?
Yeah, I mean, Michael Flynn serves at the pleasure of the president. He does not have to be confirmed by the Senate. In fact, the Senate can't even subpoena him or force him to testify because he's part of the executive branch. The illegal point that you note, which is true, some senior administration officials did think he broke the law. It's the Logan Act, which is actually from the 1700s, one of the first acts that Congress passed. And it has never actually been enforced. It's never been used to prosecute someone. So bringing a case under the Logan Act would be really hard, but politically it's really damaging. Donald Trump, has tended to think that the rules of normal politics don't apply to him, that he can sort of get by with with aides that are under fire. But we also saw that one of the people who was going to be Michael Flynn's deputy on the National Security Council, Monica Crowley, after a week of being under fire for plagiarizing a lot of columns and other things, Trump ended up sort of telling her that she couldn't get the job. She withdrew from consideration. So what that episode shows us is that at some point, if Mike Pence is really angry at Michael Flynn and Donald Trump feels like he's becoming a distraction, then Flynn may not be able to last for a long time. On the other hand, we see all the time Donald Trump sort of doubling down when he and his people come under fire and not sort of cowing or bending to pressure.
As we saw, if nothing else, with Kellyanne Conway saying last night that she's thankful to have a boss like Donald Trump after what happened with her yesterday. And so I guess more to see here. As for the travel ban, Democrats now calling for, as one part of the result here in the aftermath, a bipartisan immigration bill in the wake of the Ninth Circuit's decision. Where do you see that fight going?
I just think immigration is too toxic an issue to actually see bipartisan movement on the Hill. Even just yesterday, President Trump invited a bunch of senators over to the White House for lunch. Afterwards, Joe Manchin, moderate Democrat from West Virginia, came out and he told us the president expressed some openness about the Gang of Eight bill that passed in 2013. He said he wanted to take a look at it. And then Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, coming out and saying that's not correct and basically disputing the story that Joe Manchin had said. And then Manchin coming back and challenging the White House. The fact that there was such a blow-up over just what was said in a meeting, I think underscores how politically difficult it's going to be to get momentum for any kind of congressional action on immigration. I think there are a lot of people, there are some Republicans who want to see movement. Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, wants to do something to protect children of undocumented immigrants from being deported. It's just so hard in the current environment to see both sides getting on board with anything.
And increasingly, we are seeing signs in the dealings between the administration and Capitol Hill that seem to echo the campaign, where at times Donald Trump seemed to be running against the Republicans as much as he did the Democrats. It certainly seemed to be on display last night in Utah during a town hall for Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who walked out onto a stage and saw boos and jeers. And it was as if we were back in 2010 all over again and the Tea Party had risen anew. Do you think we're going to see more images like this in the days and months to come?
I do. I think we're going to see a lot more images like this. I think we're going to see Republicans avoiding town hall meetings so that they can avoid images like this. At the House Republican private closed-door meeting 3 days ago, they talked about increasing security for these kinds of events. They talked about kind of doing teletown halls where you have a conference call with your constituents instead of a physical meeting, so that you can avoid these kinds of scenes with thousands of people showing up. So this is something that is a huge headache for Republicans. We've seen a couple members now have this happen to them. We've seen other members avoid public meetings that they had scheduled to avoid these kinds of large protests. And it kind of speaks to this broader issue, which is Republicans have a mess that they're in with how do you repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. They promised that they were going to get rid of Obamacare. Now there's a lot of pressure, a lot of activism, and they're trying to navigate how do you do this without unleashing the kind of energy that Democrats did when they passed Obamacare in 2009.
Certainly, when it comes to a repeal and replacement that was promised in the first weeks of an administration, and on Super Bowl Sunday got pushed back to 2018, perhaps. James Hohmann of the Washington Post, as always, you make us better. We appreciate the insight.
Have a good weekend, Josh.